Welcome to Virteva's Let's Talk Microsoft 365 Roadmap Rundown. It's our new show where we talk through the latest updates, enhancements, and features coming soon to Microsoft 365. If you're listening in on our audio-only feed and wondering, hey, what happened to the regular Let's Talk podcast? No need to worry. That's not going anywhere. We're just adding a new, shorter format show to the feed, and episode 21 will be coming sometime later in May. So Holly, excited to have you joining us for the introductory show. New format, same old fun.
Yeah.
To celebrate our episode today, or our first episode, I've got a bunch of topics, and Copilot is not in a single one of them.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Before we begin, we would really appreciate it if you could give us a like, a follow, subscribe to the channel. I was looking over the weekend, over 50% of our watchers and listeners aren't subscribed, and hitting those numbers is a big deal to us, probably less of a big deal to you. So if you can just take the 1 second that it takes to hit those buttons, it will really help the show grow to more people out there, and we'd really appreciate it.
And this is one that you don't want to be missing. We're hoping to keep this on a short snippet on a regular schedule. This will help you stay in the know.
Yep, absolutely. And on this week's edition of Roadmap Rundown, we're really going to be talking about mostly Microsoft Teams. So it's a big modern work one. We're going to be talking about the end of support for classic Teams, which is coming up fairly quickly. The renaming of Microsoft Teams so that you don't have to have 2 or 3 different versions of Team on your desktop anymore. And also the ability with the rename to be able to log in with any of your Microsoft accounts, whether it be enterprise, business, or just a personal account, with one Teams client. Loop components are coming to OneNote. Teams is also introducing a new option to optimize video for screen sharing, so there's a little bit less of a lagginess when you might be sharing like a YouTube video or a recording and stream or something else off your desktop. The ability to annotate PDFs is coming directly to OneDrive, and that's going to be super cool. And then finally, the last one that we have is the ability to respond to meetings with a follow in Teams or Outlook.
Lots of exciting stuff. And I would say all of these things we learned about from the Message Center in
Absolutely.
Microsoft 365.
And if you stick around to the end of the show, we'll show you how you can sign up for Message Center by
Right.
bugging your IT admin, or we'll just show you how to use the Microsoft roadmap, which is something that I use and Holly, you use on a daily
Yep.
basis to understand what's coming, what's new, and how to prepare for that stuff. So
Exactly.
let's get right into the show. I'm going to change over to our presentation stage here, and we're going to talk about classic Teams timeline for end of support and end of availability. So to pretty much set the stage here, classic Teams will end support on July 1st, and its availability will go away on July 1st, 2025. So
Right.
you've got about a year, but the support for its ending, users are going to see informational banners pop up starting in
Yep.
April. It's April 29th right now. So you've probably already seen this happen. Users should also update their OS to avoid any installation problems or issues during the transition. But I mean, this one's pretty straightforward. I mean, we can talk
Right.
about it a little bit, but the new version of Teams started rolling out last year in May, and there was
Yep.
a lot to be desired when it started rolling out. So about 12 months ago, I remember hanging on for dear life until almost, I want to say, October or November when they brought NDI support over. But I would say that
Right.
at this point, for a regular user, is there really any reason not to switch?
Now, I would say in the very, 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 very small possibility that your company runs an app in Teams that isn't yet supported in the new Teams, then maybe, yeah, hang on as long as you can to bring that support over. But for a large majority, and I mean large, switching to the new Teams is not a huge deal. And
Mhm.
I think you should give your end users a heads up and move that along. A lot of the changes in from going from classic to new Teams, a lot of the changes are performance wise in the background. And Microsoft is really, I always feel like once they draw this line, they really are not going to be adding, they're going to say, oh, do you want to use this new feature? Guess what? It's in the new Teams. So if you want to, you know, stay on classic Teams, because you're afraid that something isn't going to work in the new teams. In the end, I would say after the summer, you're kind of really only hurting yourself because Microsoft isn't going to update the classic teams with new features. And there's some good features that are going to be coming to Teams meetings, things like that. So I'd say start preparing to make the switch.
Holly, where's the big emoji? We should probably cover that on another roadmap rundown. But Microsoft, when they started talking about the new teams last year, they're like big emojis, and you can react with anything. And they showed like in the video, like this giant smiley face just
Yes.
coming right at the camera,
Yeah.
and it
It's
just never made it for some reason. And
it's
the
always
dirty part of my mind wonders is like, were people just going to be like slamming eggplant and like water emojis at each other?
God. Well, honestly, something has stuck with me ever since Teams first rolled out is people wanted to be able to react with any emoji
Yeah.
to messages. And I remember going, I can't remember if this was at Ignite or something else, but one of the teams, product teams were like, they were like upset. They were like, this is our most requested feature.
Yeah.
So I do feel like meeting reactions, this is the natural evolution is, I don't want to be able to only give a thumbs up or clap. I sometimes have to give that 100%.
Yep.
It's just the way I roll. So, but these are the things. If you think your end users want to be able to take advantage of these new features, I mean it when I say this is mostly performance enhancements. It's things happening in the background that your end user team is not going to notice. There are a few UI changes that can be funky. Some people really like using that contacts list in chat in the new teams. That's moved to a separate app called People. But if you get this in front of people today, or you say, we're going to change a group over, make sure it's safe, and then we're going to change everyone over. Or
Yep.
you ask your help desk to write a couple knowledge base articles preparing people for this change. It's a kind of clearing the runway for them to have all the latest and greatest in Teams going forward from this summer.
For sure. So note of reference for all of our IT admins out there. Make sure that you're preparing for the end of Classic Teams. Again, it's ending support July 1st and availability on July 1st. So if you still need it, you can get it, but in general, just move to the new version.
Yeah,
So
I think I would be willing. I work in the training and end user adoption space for Teams. I would say if I had I love my meters, right? So if I had
yep,
like new Teams scary versus new Outlook scary, new Teams is the low end of that
yep.
spectrum. So new Teams, not very scary at all.
So Holly, speaking of going away, have you ever opened up your start menu and tried to open up Microsoft Teams and found maybe one or two or three different versions of Teams in there and thought to yourself, which one is the one I need? And then you open
I
up one and then you try to log in and it tells you you can't log in with that because you have the wrong version of Teams open, but there was really no clear way of telling outside of seeing in parens work or
right.
school,
Well, and I mean
or
this is
personal
the
or
same
new.
this is the same thing that happens with a lot of Microsoft products that enter into that consumer space, right? How many times have we experienced the same thing with something like OneNote, right? It's like, which flavor of this app do you want? And we all wish, Microsoft, could you please just have one thing called Teams and then figure it out on the account side, and our wish is coming true.
Yep. So what to know on this one? Starting in May 2024, it doesn't give us an exact date of when it's starting, but the Microsoft Teams application for Windows is going to be renamed to Microsoft Teams, just Microsoft Teams. And the personal version of the Windows 11 version of the app will be renamed to Microsoft Teams Personal. So there's still going to be a little bit of confusion, but this gets a little bit better as we get further into it. So
Right.
this is anticipation. This is in anticipation of an update that is going to allow access to work, school, and personal accounts from a single app. And the rollout for this begins in early May and will finish at the end of June. So we're just going to jump right to the next one from here.
Yeah.
And that's Microsoft Teams access to work, school, and personal accounts is coming to a new single desktop app. So, starting in April, Microsoft is rolling out the Teams desktop app for Windows and Mac that will allow users to access any type of Teams account, work, school, or
Mhm.
personal, and admins can control their user sign-in capabilities via group policies. So users will be able to log in using one Teams client, and it will essentially address that what's your at the end of the email address. Is it your
Right.
UPN? Is it your personal address? And once you log in, it'll just automatically take you to the right account, which, it's
Right.
from a usability standpoint, that's a huge plus. The one thing that I don't think that I saw in either of these messages was how are they going to clean up the old version? Um,
Right.
and I get the feeling, so I was talking about this on our one of my Friday calls about, hey, how do we clean up the old version of Teams? And Microsoft does have an article up there for how you get rid of the older version of
Okay.
Teams once users have switched over. I'll grab
Right.
a link and I'll put that in the show notes. But from a consumer perspective or even a prosumer perspective that doesn't have a dedicated IT department, is it doesn't seem like there is a solution to get rid of the old version. It lives in your
Right.
app data, so after a while, I think that it would probably just become inactive and you'd be able to clean it
Mhm.
up. But yeah, to be aware that there probably will be a residual for an IT admin to clean up, or if you're using this
Right.
on your own personal computer, or you have like a BYOD policy at work where you use your own computer and you just, you have it joined to Microsoft Intune or another
Yep.
MDM solution, is there probably will be some cleanup for those people. But again, coming relatively soon here as we
Right.
kind of lurch into May and June, is we are going to see a single desktop experience for Teams starting with the rename.
So I actually use so I'm really lucky as, as you are as a consultant. I not only will get guest access in a lot of client environments, right? So in a single Teams app, single
Mhm.
window, I can switch contacts, like I can switch organizations using my single account that I log in with, right? So I can move from client A to client B back to my home base in a single window. It's great. This experience, I also have a couple of accounts where I'm not a guest. I actually have my own whole account in that organization. It is awesome because it fits right in line with all of that other stuff. I can see notifications from those other environments. I can reply to chats in those other environments. It's one window to rule them all. And that's really the vision of Teams, I think. So feel like Microsoft is getting back to the point with a couple of these Teams changes. And again, I'll continue to say it's not scary to switch to the new Teams.
Yep.
Probably a lot of people in your organization, if you've showed them that toggle button, they've turned it on already. It's it's time to roll all the way over
Yeah.
into the new Teams and continue to get these feature updates.
Yeah, and I feel like we've talked about that a lot over the past few years, is that Microsoft really sees Team as that new central hub, like they saw Outlook
Mhm.
for 20 years, is they want everyone working off that single pane of glass in there. I don't think that they've fully gotten there yet. And to be completely honest, I don't think that they will ever get there until Outlook is somehow incorporated. So
Yeah.
everything's there. But I mean, with the new Web 2 view for Teams, and what they're doing with
It's
Outlook,
more and
if you're
more
paying attention, is
possible.
it's getting closer and closer to
Right.
being that one unified app. It's just not
Right.
there yet. Honestly, I hope that one day I can just get my email in a tab in Teams, because then I won't go back to Outlook for anything at that
Right.
point.
That's and like this, can I view my Outlook email in Teams? This is a question we've gotten since day one of Teams. We get it constantly as organizations Teams adoption starts to heat up. So one of the things that I think you can see as someone who has used the new Outlook, I can see it, is that Web 2.0 view of things. That is the goal, right?
Yep.
We have parity across all apps, no matter the operating system, no matter the context that they're viewed in, and we start to have those merge points, right? Between, we can't have Outlook email in Teams until everything is in that sort of, 2.0 phase, which is still years away. we're still waiting, but fingers crossed. This is
Yeah,
all, it's all
it,
moving towards something.
if you're creative enough, I'm sure that you can figure out how to get to your Outlook in your Teams right now.
Yes.
I certainly did a year ago, but it wasn't a very good experience.
Right,
So
right.
it's getting there, and it'll be there
Yeah.
soon. All right, Holly. So next up, we're going to talk about a subject very near and dear to both of our hearts,
Yes.
and that is actually two topics. It's one, loop components, which is actually how we did the show notes for our first show here. We did it in a
Yep.
loop page and a loop workspace and a loop component that we
So
shared
that's
through Teams. Um, and we're also going to be talking about OneNote. So loop components are going to be available in Microsoft OneNote starting in early April and
right.
in the desktop app coming in June. So if you go to the web version of
Yep.
OneNote right now, you can insert a loop component.
Right.
If you go to the desktop version, and we were talking about this on the last Let's Talk podcast, not to be confused with the UWP version of OneNote, which they retired after there was too much feature fragmentation.
Right.
You will not be able to use that yet, but it is coming in June. And I know this because I tried it as soon as I saw this notification in the message center and on the roadmap.
Right.
Because if I feel like Microsoft is in this weird spot where they want Loop to become the new OneNote, but it is not fully feature driven
Right.
to fit that need yet. Like one, for those that don't know, Loop is Microsoft's version of Notion, and Notion
Yep.
is a collaborative OneNote type application that does a lot of stuff that Loop doesn't do today, but Loop is adding on features as they go, and they're
Right.
getting closer and closer and closer. So, um,
But very similar structure, right?
yep,
You got notebooks, you got sections, you got pages. Just replace notebooks with like workspaces, right? Workspaces, pages, components. You have that sort of tiered model, and but yeah, like you said, they've been two very separate things,
yep.
and now they're sort of we're going to start to have visibility.
Yeah, so I've got a couple screenshots up on the screen. They look almost identical, and again, this is because the web versions are becoming closer and closer to what the desktop versions look
Yep.
like. But you'll be able to, on the Insert tab, be able to just click on Loop Component, and then you'll
Right.
be able to add it in, and then you can take that Loop Component, and again, as long as you have enabled it in your organization, which at this
Right.
point, if you haven't, please do, and then you'll be able to take those OneNote documents and just insert the component. And then you can take that loop component, you can put it into a workspace, you can
Right.
take that OneNote component, you can put it into an Outlook or a Teams message. And in the future, Holly, I don't think that they've added it to Word quite yet, at least not Word desktop app, but you
Yeah,
will be able
this
to
is
do
a
something with it sooner
really
than later.
Yeah, this is a really funny thing. I know we said we weren't going to talk about Copilot, but Copilot availability in OneNote is almost the reverse right now. So you
Yep.
can use Copilot in OneNote in Windows, the Microsoft 365 app in Windows, but Copilot in OneNote for the web is not available. So just like reverse that. But I think that this is a good advancement because one of the conundrums that we often have with OneNote, especially the newer web version, this kind of new version that the web and Windows and Teams are going to be sharing, it's really hard to share a page with someone. It's
Yep.
hard to say, I have this whole notebook and I want to just show this one page to Scott or just work with Scott on this one single page. In OneNote, I would have to share the whole notebook with Scott or migrate that page to a different shared space. Either way, it's not easy. Here, I can say, this component's in my notebook, but I want to work with Scott on it. So I get to have the best of both worlds. And I think you're right. I really see, and this is maybe after years of working on Microsoft 365 with, their updates and things like that. Sometimes it could be hard to figure out, like, why are they making this change? Why are they doing it this way? I really do believe, like you, that it's like uh, it's this sense of we have changes in our back pocket waiting in the wings where we're going to be merging OneNote and Loop and trying to make these more cohesive tools. So we're going to be strategic in how we have them talk to one another, strategic about what updates go into what tool at what time. So I hope that this just means more good things in the future for both tools,
Yep.
no matter if they stay separate or become more one. I'm not really sure, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, over the last 5 to 10 years, technology has really changed a lot, and I think that a lot of companies have realized that we need to start developing for web first rather than hard-coded desktop. You're gonna install this just because people are working more off their phones, they're working off more tablets now and
Hmm.
less off a traditional laptop or desktop. And even in the cases that you are working off a laptop or desktop, I mean, like we had talked about this back in December. This is the great use of having an F3 license. Is if you don't actually need to install it and you can do everything from the web,
Yep.
just save yourself some costs there, or just do a couple of bolt-ons here and there
Right.
for the extra stuff that you need. But yeah, as we see more stuff, and again, I know that there is a lot of naysayers and people that are upset about the changes to Teams and mostly
Hmm.
the changes to Microsoft Outlook is they're doing this so that they can prepare themselves for the future, and that's going to lead to a better experience for all of us in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, the Outlook changes alone. We know that this is going to be a big deal, but I can only imagine how much they're going to be able to do, how many features we're going to be able to realize in that app life cycle once
Mhm.
their product team doesn't have to develop for four separate, versions of Outlook. Um,
Yep.
it, it's a good thing, but as an end user in the moment, while this change is happening, they're thinking 20 steps ahead, but we're having to deal with that, first step on that change journey. So I get it, but I really do think that this, again, there, some of these things like using loop components in OneNote, um, I hope that you can see it as like a good thing, but some of our listeners, some of our viewers might still be thinking like, I still can't really figure out why and what and how for a loop. It's okay, right?
If you're
If the OneNote concept is really solid for you, let that stuff start to come in and show itself in a place where you're familiar.
Yeah, and if you're an IT admin or you're just an IT like general like kind of like change champion or you work in training
Mhm.
or anywhere else in the organization, like start taking a look like if you start taking a look at Microsoft Loop and try and
Mhm.
understand use cases for where you can actually fit that into your different work streams. And Holly, you and I did a
Yep.
podcast back about this in the fall last year, but maybe as Loop is developing more and more, maybe we should actually revisit that topic and do more of a kind of
Right.
a formal kind of like run back on it and look at, hey, here's how it was, here's what's changed, here's what's coming
Yeah.
down the pipe.
I mean, I guess we talked about before the show, we talked about some honorable mentions thing. I mean, we were talking about Loop recently, and you could not share a Loop component externally,
Yep.
and now that's
Yeah.
coming too. So I think it is. It's always worth, kind of a good rule of thumb for a lot of Microsoft 365 tools. It's always worth a second look, especially those that are brand new, because they're just babies. They're just babies, and they grow up so
They
quickly.
grow up
So
so quick.
you got to take a look. I mean, think about the, 7, 8 year journey that Teams took, right? It was a long time, but it's, I mean, when Teams first started, we were, I think we were all kind of like, oh, so it's just
It's a
replace
chat
Skype,
program. This is
right?
this is Skype with a T.
So now it's so much more, and the concept is so much more apparent. So that's kind of where I say, like, don't write loop off, don't, kind of like give it some time. If Microsoft's going to make it make sense.
All right. Speaking of Microsoft Loop, let's loop back around to Microsoft Teams.
Yes.
So next up, we have Message Center 715695 or Roadmap ID 93483, and that is optimizing video settings for screen sharing when using Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is going to provide its users with a manual setting to optimize screen sharing for video clips by
Right.
reducing lag and improving on quality of video playback when shared in a Teams meeting. So the
Mhm.
rollout for this is going to begin in targeted release in May to mid-May, and there's really no additional action here.
Right.
So whenever they say targeted release, just keep in mind that Targeted release means if you have a setting in your tenant that says, hey, I want features updates early, those users that are in that group, or if you have it for the entire organization, which probably don't do that, by the way,
Yep.
they'll get those updates a little bit sooner than others. As far as a more mainstream rollout, they're saying here late May, but I would not be surprised at all to see this roll out closer to probably early to mid June for everybody else. We've got kind of a quick picture down here of what that looks like. You can see that under when you're sharing, you get the extra options for give control, share sound, which I believe that that's also a new setting, right? I haven't
That's
seen
been
share
around
sound. Has it?
forever.
Maybe I'm
Yep.
just never
Actually,
paying
it's one of
attention.
those features. Again, this is just a good reminder. Um, Probably there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do in Teams meetings that you just probably aren't even aware of. But being
Mhm.
able to share system sound for, is the first bar to clear when you're going to play a video for someone in a Teams meeting, and then after that, optimizing your video. But
Yep.
that's really important. So if you are, you're going to do a product demo or something like that, and you want to play back a video. Occasionally, the frame rate or some different things would be a little choppy, or the performance just wasn't up to snuff, and
Yep.
that's what they're fixing here.
Yep. So again, you'll be able to improve that. This is just a very quick update. Most people like me won't notice that there's a new button until
Yep,
it's already
exactly.
there. I think I'm just so used to it being hidden under the other settings bar
True,
that I'm
that
not
is
used to
true.
seeing it there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would say as far as, sharing video, this is just a good reminder. Maybe not everyone shares video in Teams meetings, or you have shared a video in a Teams meeting and it was a terrible experience.
Yep.
So again, worth a second look if you have w- um, not been using Teams to perform that function. You can share your system sound. You can play video, and now that playback will be optimized, smooth for everyone.
All right. So we've got two more to go, third with an honorable mention. So next up here is Microsoft OneDrive, the ability to annotate PDFs with text boxes. This is message center ID 783215 and roadmap 387807. Microsoft's introducing the ability to OneDrive for users to be able to annotate PDFs with text boxes. And this is going to begin rolling out in the middle of June, in the middle of May to early June
Right.
2024. And this one's pretty spot on with what it tells you can do is if
Right.
you have a PDF that you have in OneDrive or in SharePoint and you open that up, is you'll be able to edit it directly in OneDrive without having the need for an additional PDF editing program
Yep.
like an Adobe or like a One PDF or something like
Right.
that.
So this is something that I think is like, this is Microsoft's first pass at this. So one of the things that I will say when I first saw this, and yeah, this add text, you can add text boxes, you can do some different kind of like pen and highlighter markup. This is good, but remember, the ceiling is high. This is our first iteration of this. My hope is that they continue to have parity with some features that we might be looking for, that we would maybe get from kind of that Adobe Reader, things like that. One of the questions that I get a lot about the, looking at files in Teams is specifically on this. I,
Yep.
I can look at a PDF, but I can't edit it if I'm in my Teams window. So again, will this meet your expectations? Maybe, maybe not, but it's a good start. So
Yep.
so just know this, I feel like this has a lot of implications, not just for OneDrive, right? But really for using and looking at files in Teams.
And I mean, this is going to help kind of reduce app creep too. So if you don't need Adobe Reader on a machine, or you don't need another PDF reader on a machine, this
Mhm.
lowers kind of your overall vulnerability
Right.
standpoint. And like it just, I feel like again, it puts just more things into Microsoft's court, and you become more and more Microsoft dependent on some of this stuff. But at the same point, is it does reduce kind of like your vulnerability standpoint, because you
Right.
have less things that need to be patched when a 0 day presents itself.
Yeah, and this I can see it. I think you would definitely see it from that administrative operational side. I see it from those end user sides where it's like, Holly just told me I can do everything in Teams except annotate a
Except,
PDF,
yes.
right? So I look at it from a training standpoint. I'm really excited about this feature just simply because this is something people have wanted. Again, it's not necessarily going to do. I don't want anyone to get confused. This may not do that sort of Adobe Reader, sign and share, or kind of what you might look for that way. But being able to make a couple of annotations to a PDF, that's the first step, right? So we can only go up from here. Microsoft will probably continue to develop this feature.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last one, and then on to our honorable mention, Holly. So this was one that I had actually read about. I want to say that I feel like I read about this like 2 or 3 months back, and then it popped back up on the Message Center that it was finally starting to roll out. So under Message Center, MC 786325, Microsoft Outlook and Teams users will soon be able to respond to meetings with a follow. So I'm still kind of scratching my head on it because what this basically does is you hit the word follow, but what it just means to the meeting inviter is that you've responded tentatively. So, Holly, tell
Right.
me a little bit more about why you would use this feature.
Well, I think one of the things that we see a lot, I think we saw a lot starting in the pandemic, and it hasn't really eased up, is just this we're flooded with meetings, back to back to backers all day long. We have high meeting loads. We can't accept every meeting that comes our way. However, we're often confronted with that, I want to continue to get updates about this meeting. I want to stay included, but I don't want to let the organizer, I don't want to accept it just to keep it visible. So if you follow a meeting, it's more of a neutral, like, keep this in my line of vision, but I'm not going to be there. So people will see this new option for RSVPing for a meeting when they're in Outlook.
Yep. So one of the things that I did think was interesting about this as I was kind of reading through this, so the follow responses will inform the organizers, letting them know that you're going to follow. It frees up time. It still blocks your calendar, right? So it's still there regardless, or
But
does
it
it?
doesn't show up as it shows up as free. So if someone else is looking for a meeting time with you,
Yes.
this doesn't indicate that you have a blocked off time. So for example, if I were to use a scheduling assistant, again, I'm assuming this because I haven't seen this yet, but if I use a scheduling assistant to auto pick a time, maybe between you and me, if you or I have followed a meeting, it's free on our calendar, so that will still be shown as available meeting time. So I think this will be helpful. Honestly, I think it will be a really good practice in organizations to follow a meeting that you're not going to attend. I would say even
And
I look at
honestly,
it like, if you want to say tentative, I might be able to attend, say tentative. But if you're like, I'm not coming to this meeting, but remember, if you decline it, it goes
yeah,
away.
it's
That
gone.
invite
Yep.
goes away. It's gone. It goes to your deleted items, but it's sort of like following is sort of saying, I'm not going. No, I'm not going to be there, but I want to keep track of this meeting. I want to remember that it's occurring. So it's sort of that new fourth choice.
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, I had gotten myself into the habit quite a long time ago. It's like if a meeting was coming up and I didn't want to go to it or I couldn't go to it, is either I didn't respond and then it stayed on my calendar and
Yeah.
it told the meeting organizer that I didn't respond, or I hit tentative because maybe I'll come, but maybe I
Yep.
won't. But I think that the follow option is interesting because it's going to, and I'll scroll up here real quick, not at general availability, but shortly after. That could be 1 day, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. But sometime after that, it is actually going to alert the meeting organizer that you chose to follow. And
Yep.
then it will tell them, hey, you might want to record this because Stacy is following the meeting. She probably won't be
Great.
here, but if you follow it and Stacy has Copilot,
Right.
she can recap the meeting. Oh, we stuck Copilot in there
I already talked about it with OneNote. I ruined it.
and put a little dinger on the bottom of
I
the screen
know
every
the
time someone
Copilot
says it.
count.
But yeah, I think that it's an interesting feature. I'm excited to see how users end up using this in real time or in the real world situations, or if it just becomes, it's the same thing as it's always been. It's just you see a lot of your meeting invites continue to just say no response on them.
Right. So this is one where I'm like, oh my gosh, we so need this. You and I probably both know a few serial meeting acceptors, where they accepted it, but they're not coming, right?
Well, and
So
I mean, some of that too is just there is actually a setting in Outlook that allows
you
you
can
to,
auto
by
accept,
default,
right?
accept every meeting.
But I will say, the way that we want our calendar to look, the way that we interact with our calendar tends to be very obviously self-centered, right?
Yep.
I'm going to not respond to that meeting invite because I don't want to lose it. But it doesn't indicate back to the organizer whether I'm actually coming or not. Um, and you and I know that when we start a meeting and we think someone might be coming, we might not start that meeting on time, all that sort of stuff. So this is one of those things where when this comes out in your organization, not only should you tell your end users about it, but it may be a good idea to revisit or say, give some scenarios to people to change their habits around how they're, that you get to have it both ways. You get to have the calendar that you want to look at, and the organizers of your meetings get to know truly whether you are definitely coming, definitely not coming, or maybe coming. And
Yep.
we've tend to use those, before we only had three choices instead of four, and we developed maybe some not so great habits around using those three choices. So it's a good one to reinforce in your organization.
I mean, I, for one, think that I will use it on a meeting where I know that I am not going to attend rather than say tentative or just not respond. I think that I will hit follow. So
Yep,
we'll tell our PM or whoever's running
right.
the meeting, hey, can you hit record on this? Because I actually want to get caught up.
Exactly. Exactly. I think this is just, meeting culture has evolved, and I'm so happy that tools like Outlook and Teams, we're not just going to keep doing the same thing that we always have. This fourth option, I know it's not a big deal for some people, but honestly, if I'm a project manager and I see, I go to that status call and I see 15 people didn't even respond. What is that supposed to mean to me, right? Should I wait? Should I record? What's happening? So hopefully, again, for you project managers out there, my hope is that you'll start to see some follows pop back up, and you'll understand those people probably aren't coming, but it's like Scott said, it's a good moment to hit record and make sure that you're sharing updates on those meetings with everyone.
Yep. And again, it's going to start rolling out late this month. So right now, as we're sitting here, it might be actually going out to target members. I haven't seen it just yet, but it should be out soon. And then most folks that aren't in targeted release will have it by the end of
Right,
July. So about
right,
midway through the
absolutely.
summer. All right. So final update, and I promise that I will not spend too much time on this, is I went to Ignite. I went to the Meta booth. I tried Immersive Spaces when it was rolling out in preview, and it is now generally available. So if you are looking to strap a bucket to your face with a large battery in it, your VR goggles, to take advantage of some of these super sweet looking immersive spaces where you can float around in your Casper body without any legs and roast marshmallows. You can now do that. If you do not have an expensive VR headset, you actually can still take advantage of this by just jumping into a Teams meeting with a couple of people and hitting immersive spaces. And then you can kind of walk around in there with the arrow keys and use
Yep,
your mouse to control stuff. There are license requirements to this feature that you need either Teams Essential, Business Basic, Standard, Premium, or an E5 or an E3 or an E1 if you have Office 365. It is not supported by Teams 1.0, so another reason to upgrade. And you do need a PC with 4 cores and 8 gigabytes of RAM, though I feel like in most cases today, unless you're a heavily virtualized environment, you probably
right,
have.
right.
And then if you want to use the VR headset, your battery bucket, you do need to also buy one of those, which can get expensive, usually
Yes,
upwards of 1,000 to 1,500 bucks.
yes.
But yeah, this is coming or it's here. So if you're interested in taking a look at it, even just a cursory look to see what it's like, You can pop in there now and you should be able to see it in any
Yep.
tenant.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Um, so that wraps us up for the first roadmap rundown, Holly. But before we finalized, why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about how they can pop in the message center or the roadmap and look at some of this stuff themselves to keep their own teams up to date?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I get asked a lot when we're leading trainings, we talk about new features, is how am I supposed to know what's coming new to Microsoft 360? How am I supposed to, just the little old me? Well, one of the things, kind of like best yet worst kept, secret of every Microsoft 365 tenant, meaning your admin portal, is the fact that Microsoft 365 tells you every day, things that are coming, updates ranging from very highly technical service updates all the way down to minor changes that may impact end users where you might want to update your training. All of those messages are sent to you. They're relevant to your tenant. So you're going to see a relevancy tag saying like this is highly relevant to you because you're licensed for this and people in your organization use it. That's going to be a key for you. But the message center by default is only available to people that have an administrative role. So when you go in and you're like, where is the message center? You'll see up there at the very top bar that Scott has on the screen, the Microsoft 365 Admin Center is where you find it. But
Mm.
despair not, you do not have to be an admin to have access to the message center. Your admin, or hey, you admins, if you're listening or watching, you can assign the message center reader role to people in your organization that need to be in the know. So people that work in your help desk, and I'm not just talking managers, people that pick up the phone, that respond to requests in your help desk, they should have access to this tool. People in your training and employee development department should have access to this tool. Anyone who's constantly wanting, if you have super users, champions, give them that role. They'll have access to the message center reader role in the tenant. The other thing is they can choose to receive some updates via email. It's huge. It's huge. I bang this drum a lot with groups where we're working on Microsoft projects with is, I don't want just your admins to have access to this. You should have lots more people in your organization in the know, because the more people that have access to Message Center, the less surprised you are going to be by an upcoming feature.
Or the roadmap. The roadmap is
Yes,
also useful. I
right?
put that up on the
So,
screen. We were talking about this kind of pre-show. Is a lot of times when I go to look for something old by a message center ID, I can't find it anymore. But generally, if I have the roadmap ID, and that's why we decided to name this show the roadmap rundown instead of the message center
right,
show, is because a lot of stuff that time that stuff disappears on the roadmap, that is usually less the case, though I don't know how big their databases are and how often they purge them. But
right,
it's a good thing to know that both of them are there.
right.
Also, if you have the message center reader role, I believe that you can also see health alerts as well for your instance.
That's
Very helpful
right.
for an
Yep.
IT admin at help desk. But yeah, either resource here is great. We'll put these in the
Yeah.
show notes, and then you won't have to come back and listen to any future episodes because they'll all
You
be.
already you already know them. So
You're
the
not you're
roadmap.
not coming to us for that. You're coming to us for our own opinions on why
That's
you should
right.
jump in to Teams immersive spaces.
Yeah, if you want to know how I feel about a message center update, come here. But the message center again, that is it requires a role in your tenant. But the
Yep,
Microsoft 365 roadmap that Scott just showed, that is publicly available. So
absolutely.
anyone in the world can go out to the roadmap and see what's coming. Now, the relevancy on the roadmap versus the message center, you have to dial it in. So you have to choose what cloud you're working in, et cetera. But if you know that, you should be able to filter out updates that you apply to you or not. So for example, you're going to see everything ranging from GCC tenants to, classic tenants. So just be aware of that. But both resources are great. I hope if anything, and I told Scott when we started this show, said if a few more people have message center reader roles as a result of this show, I'm in. I will
Yeah,
make time to do this
100%.
show.
Yep. So speaking of show, Holly, you will not be back next week. We have a special guest coming back to the show. Chris Strong will be here for, I feel like, almost like the first time in like
In a
10 months.
while.
Yeah, he'll be on here helping me out. And then we have another Let's Talk episode planned for later in the month. Don't even know what that's about yet. We're going to figure it out as we get closer to it. But Holly, why don't you lead us out for a change? So how can people contact us if they need help?
I don't know the script, Scott. You'll have to share it with me in the chat or something.
All right, I will lead us out.
Sorry.
It's, it's okay. I
I know I've
honestly, I
heard
feel
you
like
say it a million times, but I didn't memorize it.
I feel like sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up saying it in my sleep, and I probably
I'm
freak
sure
my
you
wife
do.
out. But again, thank you for everyone for tuning into the show. Again, this was a new one that we were doing. We're really excited to share it with you, and we plan on continuing this roadmap rundown. If you want to know more about Microsoft 365 or you need help implementing different services and products, our professional services team can help you implement them, and our managed service teams can help manage them for you on a daily basis. To do so, you can contact us at Virteva by emailing us at letstalk@virteva.com or by visiting our website at www.virteva.com. And once again, if you made it this far, please don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps us out. Thanks again, and see you next week.